Hi, welcome back to Cubs and Culture. 2016 Ben-Hur is really shitty, but it's sort of shitty because the studio just didn't treat it as a tentpole. It was supposed to be like this quick, easy way of making a little bit of money. Anyway, so the story of Ben-Hur, if you have never seen it, is this guy named Judah Ben-Hur is asked by his childhood friend Masala, who is the tribune of Rome and Judea, to betray his countrymen and basically become a turncoat. And then Ben-Hur refuses. There's through a happenstance of fate. There's a accident which endangers the governor of the Roman governor's life. Ben-Hur ends up as a gallery slave, and then he goes to Rome through the machinations of the plot. Wins his freedom. Comes back to Judea. Ends up racing Masala. To get revenge because Ben-Hur thinks his sister and mother have been killed. They actually become lepers. So anyway, he races Masala in the Great Chariot Race, which is the most famous sequence in the film. Etc. Masala gets killed. Ben-Hur doesn't feel like satisfied with that. And then the last bit of the story is about him trying to get his mother and sister back, and because they're lepers, and trying to cure them by Christ, by Jesus. But it ends up Christ is being crucified at that time. So there's, like I said, there's a through line here where it's mostly about Ben-Hur trying to get revenge and actually get peace from his family to get them back together. That's sort of like his drive. But then there's a subplot where it begins with the Christ, Jesus being born. There's a scene where when Ben-Hur is going to the galleys, Christ gives him water. You have the Sermon on the Mount, etc., etc. Okay, so the thing is, one of the things about this movie, which is kind of interesting, is in terms of like character motivations. Masala and Ben-Hur, they're supposed to be childhood friends, and if you look at it from Ben-Hur's perspective, like being asked to become a turncoat and then cutting off your childhood friend, that makes perfect sense. But for Masala's reaction of condemning his childhood friend innocently for an innocent, like, it doesn't really make all that much sense. It's like it's too, like, because of the way in which the ideas in the film and the story are built up, in terms of it being like this sort of political thing, it's not personal enough, or at least Gore Vidal and William Wyler didn't find it personal enough. So if you watch the movie, and I have no idea how people in the 1950s missed this, or for that matter, Charlton Heston. Masala, not on Ben-Hur's part, but on Masala's part, it's played as if unrequited sexual love, where he really comes across as Masala was erotically interested in Ben-Hur, and it comes across sort of like a jilted lover type thing. So as a queer person, I kind of like that this great biblical epic from the 1950s has this really kind of gay aspect to it. In any case, I think it really works, and it makes it at least more interesting. So even if you thought the political motivations were strong enough for Masala, I like the personal stuff. The other thing about the writing I like is, because the movie is ultimately a theologically interested film, a lot of the characters' sort of worldviews are always hinted at. So, like the sea captain of the galley ship that Ben-Hur ends up, he's a cynic. Then you have the sheik, who's a very sort of opportunist and moneymaker, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then you have like one of the wise men, who's like the first Christian, the true Christian in it. And one of the things I like about this, in terms of like its writing, is a lot of times the truly Christian messages are given secondhand. So you have like Balthazar doing love thy enemy and basically put down the sword. And then it's immediately undermined by the sheik saying, yeah, he's a good guy, and that works for if everyone's good, but not everyone's good. So like, there's so like in a lot of ways it feels, and it works thematically and it works dramatically, but it feels like the movie's taking sort of the Christian message of love thy enemy as it's sort of its main thing that Judah Ben-Hur has to learn, and this is why after the chariot race, when Masala died, Ben-Hur doesn't have peace because he needs to learn to love his enemy, which is actually strangely very moving. Having rewatched it again, but in any case, there's enough other sort of theological or worldview orientations in the film of sympathetic characters that you can sort of, like, if you're not a Christian, you can almost like, yeah, I can see why. Like I can see the point. Like Weiler and Vidal and the other screenwriters, there's like 5 of them on this film, were smart enough to give non-Christian views sort of a hearing in the film, and I like that. With that being said, the writing and sort of the plotting is a little bit uneven. The leprosy stuff itself is okay, but the problem is the wife and the sister aren't developed as characters. They are, not wife, mother. Mother and sister aren't developed as characters. They're just the mother and sister. They're incredibly flat, one-dimensionally. And so sort of the last, 30 minutes are a little bit not as dramatic as it could be, because you're trying to get these characters cured of leprosy, but you don't care about them. Anyway, let me just switch to that, to direction. One of the things I really like about this film is in terms of Masala and Judah Ben-Hur, basically all the male characters. I know, 1950s sexism. There's a really, it's an epic film, so it's big and it's glorious, and it has a lot of size, but a lot of the times Weiler directs, he was famous for this, it's called deep focus, where the background and the foreground are both in focus. So a lot of the times this movie comes across as a very intimate story because it really is centered on this male characters and sort of friendship and everything, just in this sort of big panoramic view. So a lot of times what happens is there's with deep focus, there's the intimate story in front of an epic backdrop. So a lot of times there would be scenes up in the towers of or the skyline is always there. So I think it's a nice balance between the spectacle and the intimacy. The other sort of thing for direction that I like, I think it's somewhat amazing, is Charlton Heston is not a good actor. He's bombastic, he's hammy, etc. With that being said, he's actually good in Judah Ben-Hur. It's his best performance because it's actually a performance. It's the only time where you feel like you're watching a character and not Charlton Heston being Charlton Heston. And then the other thing about this is, and I think this choice was made because Weiler's Jewish. Again, I'm not sure if he was observant, but in any case, he was not Christian. Christ never speaks. You never see his face. People always talk about him, etc. So in a lot of ways, that portrayal of Christ sort of, in some ways, it becomes much more about Jesus of Nazareth, like the historical figure, and not like Jesus Christ, the Christian Messiah. And so, yes, this film is very much a Christian film. It's about laying down the sword and loving thy enemy. That's the theme. It's Jesus of Nazareth of the Beatitudes. It's sort of that sort of Christ. There's only really one miracle or theological element which you can't interpret humanistically or not in a non-Christian way, which is at the end, mother and sister's leprosy is cured via a miracle, though not by Christ. It just happens. So I guess you could just say it's an act of God, but it's so connected to when Christ died that it's pretty hard to get out of that. But in any case, because Christ is never shown, at least theologically, there's going to be some people like Muslims, because of how strict they are on no graven images, but theologically, it's so it's so about sort of the Jesus of Nazareth that I don't see how, for the most part, people couldn't get behind this, at least as far as a film. And it is mostly sort of a big sword and sandal epic. And so, like, the chariot race is great. And even the sea battle, which is utterly dated and it's used with models and stuff, and it's very obviously models, but even that, I like the sea battle itself is sort of impressive. So, like, this movie's kind of uneven. There's places where it could have been tightened up and the writing could have been crisper. But for what it is, it's a really entertaining film. But the thing is about it is because it's so Christian. It's sort of the best, like it's sort of the most Christian movie I can think of that's had an impact on the culture, because, like, Ben-Hur is referenced in Phantom Menace. The pod racing is just the chariot scene in space, well, on a different planet. So that's sort of why I want to talk about it. So, like, here's the thing: I want people to take away from this review is the movie is discussing sort of Christ's central command of love thy enemy through a revenge story, and Ben-Hur as a character's doesn't reach his goal, even though he gets his revenge when Masala dies, and it sort of repulses him because it's about forgiveness. It's very much a sort of the very Jesus of Nazareth of the Sermon on the Mount that it's aimed at. Okay, so that's sort of what I want people to take away. I feel like I'm just repeating myself. Okay, so see you in about 2 hours or 3 hours after I get my thoughts about Gladiator in order. Okay, see you in a bit.